大家好。
Good morning. My name is Steve Hu, President of the Taiwan Creative Content Agency. I would like to welcome you all to the first session of the International Conference of the Taiwan Creative Content Fest. The opening ceremony is being conducted as we speak. And this year, I would like to, on behalf of the Taiwan Creative Content Agency, welcome all of you to this annual cultural extravaganza. This event brings together the movers and shakers of the creative, cultural, and the content industries, hoping to present to you a platform for the exchange of insights, ideas. This is also a trading platform for IP and contents. It is our sincere hope that we will be able to further discuss the prospects of the content industries in Taiwan and around the world. The Taiwan Creative Content Fest aims also to present the characteristics and the value chain of Taiwan's content industries, not just to the people joining us today, but also to those joining us online, in Taiwan, and beyond. The year 2020 has ushered in a wide range of challenges. COVID-19 is indeed a black swan. It has disrupted and changed the way we view and live our everyday lives. The cultural landscape is transforming as well. Lockdowns have made world and international travels out of reach. However, we are turning to other tools and platforms and methods to connect and communicate with one another. Internet is one, content creation is yet another example. In the future, when we look back at this year, the year 2020, what changes will we notice? So, ladies and gentlemen, this morning we have invited two renowned speakers who will bring their insights and expertise to the discussion. The first speaker will be T. Wuglo. She is already online. She's standing by. As you could see, we're showing her image here. Good morning. I was told to speak slowly because simultaneous translation is being provided throughout today's discussion. So we will try our best to accommodate and slow down. So she is the creative director of Google's Creative Lab in Sydney. And the second speaker today will be Audrey Tang. She is Taiwan's digital minister, and she is also described as the prodigy or the genius minister of Taiwan by many Japanese media outlets. The two of them will each make a brief presentation before we open the floor for discussion. One of my tasks this morning is to manage time. So please allow me to explain to you how the morning session will go. The two speakers will each speak for 15 minutes. They will leave us about 20 minutes for panel discussion. After the panel discussion, we will have about 10 minutes for Q&A, during which we will open the floor and take questions from audience, including those of you joining us on the showground or those joining us online. For those of you joining us online, please submit your questions using our question submission software, Slido. So if you have any questions anytime during the presentation, feel free to submit your questions using our online software. Without further ado, I will now turn the program over to T. Technologies are shaping and changing our life and the way we engage with artistic expressions. This morning, T. Wuglo will take us on the journey looking into the transformations and challenges we will face in the next decade. So now let us turn our program over to T.
Good morning, thank you. It is a great honor to be here addressing you from my living room and to address our esteemed guests and executives that have gathered here online. So thank you for your attention. I am rather daunted at the prospect of showing you everything that is possible and that is happening in this extraordinary world that we live in at the moment. But we'll do our best. My name is T. Uglow. I'm an independent creative consultant for creative labs at Google in Sydney, and I've worked at Google for 14 years now, building teams in London for the European markets, and then from Sydney and Singapore for the Asia-Pacific region. I think in that 14 years, much has changed. If you try and think what 2006 felt like, it already felt like the internet had an enormous role, an enormous part of our lives, but it did not perhaps feel quite so much like we could not exist without it. For those of you with small children, I have two small boys. I'm very fond of asking them and their friends when they think the internet was invented. And they, without fail, will pick a completely abstract number because they have no idea. They have no idea what the world was ever like without the internet, without things on demand, with things in real time. And this causes interesting challenges because as a generation, we are coming from a place always where we do remember that. We remember screenless periods of time where you didn't have screens because there was only one screen. That was a television, maybe. So it's been an extraordinary period for us, and it's slightly less extraordinary for them. My work at Google over the last 15 years has been very much focused on culture, on cultural organizations, and enabling artists and writers and dancers and composers and any cultural practitioners to digitally augment their work in ways that I feel that it might be able to stay relevant, so that the traditions that we take from the past might still be relevant in 10 years' time. A lot of that comes down to the brain, really. Comes down to where we, how humans think. We are a strange animal, and we have to remember sometimes that we are. I'm not a particularly formal speaker. My ideas will drift across ideas and disciplines, and I'm as interested in neurology or or ecosystems or social anthropology as I am in, I was about to say theatre and literature, but that's not my job either. Or I suppose the digital development, which is my job, and I don't know if you can see, surrounded by wires and technology. The things I'm most interested in at the moment are smart homes and wireless solutions, and also this ability to make languages more more understandable. Seems a strange thing to say, but we are currently obscuring the computer languages. So we have all of these important conceits and blinds that our brains will let us do and won't let us do, these biases that we talk about a lot, these allays and ways through the creative and content production process. The idea of archetypes, of role models, of stereotypes, of unwritten rules, of things that are so just because they are so and they always have been. The idea of the intersubjective, things which we all just agree to believe in, like money or law, and what happens when we break those things. This is happening more and more because actually in virtual worlds we're not bound by those things, and it's the blurring between these things is happening more and more. For example, what is a book if it is not bound and made of paper? Does it need to retain that sense of bookness? In what ways is it unencumbered? What can a digital book be that it can't be as a bound book? This is a project that we worked on several years. I sort of included a photo myself because I was thinking, well, what if this talk hasn't been recorded? What if what if I'd actually done it the day before? What if, how would you know? Would you know? Would it matter? Does it matter? Is there any difference? These are questions that we don't ever ask ourselves because previously you were on stage in front of you. We bind ourselves to the way things have been, and our content in particular is very prone to this thing of our desire to create to the best limits of our form. But we often don't know what binds the form, or what the form might be able to become if we don't break the form. So this talk is about that idea, the one that very thing holding us back is a belief in the cultural supremacy of our form, rather than in future forms. I talk a lot. I make small but interesting experiments. I write about doubt, I write about philosophy, I write about technology and how it works in our lives. I wander around the world effectively being gay for Google, because this is now as much of a role as anything else. I role model and an ambassador for that. I very recently, well, actually today, you may see that there was one of my projects, which is a transgender pride flag, finally kind of became released on the Apple operating system. So it is now on iPhones. And obviously nothing in the world really exists until it is on the iPhone. So you have so I have received much congratulations today because it is on the iPhone. These are the sorts of odd projects we do. And this is a project which came out of the pandemic, came out of crisis, came out of what we should be doing, what theatre should be in a pandemic. And actually for us it was relatively straightforward, a series of plays that were created as online experiments in the notion of theatre. What is theatre when there can be no cast? And again, for a lot of people this was too fast, but if you are already thinking in those spaces, it's not a problem. We spent 10 years thinking in those spaces. We spent 10 years making small projects. So we have all of these, sorry. I don't know, we have sort of teddy bears from the Opera House, or we have plays about ghosts, we have books made on mobiles, ideally so that the artists rather than the engineers become the ones capable of making those decisions for us. It is nice to be able to put things in the hands of the developers, but it's not what we want to do in the longer term. For example, we did a production of Midsummer Night's Dream with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and when we did it, we sought to do it actually as an exercise in Shakespeare. In Shakespeare was forever challenging the technical capacities, but also almost as a slight sort of forbearing of what has happened online. This is like 2013, but we could see that you could move in and out of this theatre world and the online world very easily. So we did that over 3 days. And now you see that happening, what is real, what is unreal, who is narrating our stories, and to what degree can we trust them? We've been working with theatre. Again, this is another one where we look at, this was a great failure. I'm a big fan of sort of supporting our failures, because this is a project that went incredibly badly wrong. It was rubbish. But if we don't learn from that, and if we don't share what went wrong, if we don't talk about how writers and humans can't really be cajoled into changing, actually a lot of it becomes about sort of defensiveness, about what we can feel we are willing to give, how much you're willing to put your name on the line in experiments. All of these are experiments. Everything is experimental. We did an experimental piece of theatre with which used old technology and made it feel magical. It doesn't need to be the latest cutting edge thing. Often what works best is realizing that ideas that you may have had for a long time are now possible just because different things talk to different technologies, or technologies have got small enough to be carried. The kind of journey that these devices have been on, and the world that we're moving into now, with the sensors that we can have in every room, and the way in which we can control them to speak to each other. This was a play which used a cast of 6 and an audience of 2, and allowed you to hear into the mind of whichever audience member you were looking at. In other words, it was interested in your location and orientation. We work with the Punch Drunk in the UK. We work with all sorts of developers, all sorts of different people, something which you will always be doing, which is moving between these different types of languages, and moving between the different spaces of whether you are, I tend to garden, I tend to bring people together and allow them to create, and as opposed to conducting and standing at the front and telling people how to create. These are very different models. There are different models. What the pandemic has taught us is that these models have changed. These models have things that we have, like the introverts have never been able to do, like to work from home. Whether we will ever go back to working in offices in the kind of way we have. Whether, for me, creativity works better on a model of a curiosity model, and how you map that into an industrial practice where you need an output, and ideally you need to know what the output is before. How do you do that? How do we manage our relationship with information? We as a species really are changing our relationship from this model, where it was a very linear idea of information, where we've moved from one thing to another thing, where we would move around a museum, even when it is digital, even when we allow it to be like that, we still expect them to have a direct relationship to a much more random relationship of information, and how on earth we can understand sort of all of the knowledge that we have to collect in the same way as we would when we're moving through life, when we're moving through time. Ultimately, what you see in America is exactly what we should be seeing in our content. What you are experiencing, we cannot write these things anymore because time has looped in on us. When you go home this evening and try and explain what happened, or you go out for well, in an earlier time when you went out for drinks, you would hear from different people, different perspectives of the same event, and it might affect your experience. You would hear different points of information from different times, and you would create a coherent whole. Every day we walk through the world, and we do not expect every piece of information to come to us in the appropriate form, in the appropriate way. We're very good at managing all of these different pieces of information, and I think that what we are beginning to do, what you'll see more and more over the next 5 to 10 years, is information bursting out of these silos of form, screens, or podcasts, or books, or webcasts, or TV programs, when there is absolutely no reason why anything should be bound in that way. So I've got one little video that I would like to show you as we close. It's called Sounds in Space. It's about creating those kind of augmented realities where what we are asking the computer to do, this computer, is to know where it is much more than what it is seeing. So rather than showing you information, it is just letting the world know where you are and what you're looking at, and feeding you back audio based on that. So here are a few experiments from that. hope that you get the kind of inspiration that is out there to create the kind of experiments that the very brave organisations that I've been lucky enough to work with have done, and that you are able to hear from some of the most amazing people that you've got lined up today. So thank you very much.
T. T, please stay online. Go away. 那我先
I would like to thank T for her most inspirational presentation. I myself is an author, is a writer. The forms of idea expressions are transforming, but books, no matter what form they take, are here to stay. The next presenter for the first session this morning will be Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. Now, faced with the many challenges brought about by the new normal, where do we go from here? How do we adapt? Audrey said that since we are running behind schedule, she will make her presentation shorter. So without further ado, please welcome Audrey Tang. I'm trying to maintain social distance from everybody. Hi, good morning. I'm so glad to be here. As per the request by the interpreters, I would try to slow down, and also I would like to make sure that I'm speaking slowly enough so that the information can be translated accurately and be conveyed to T. And I will be giving a speech at APEC tomorrow. However, after hearing T's presentation, I feel that I will be making minor adjustments so that what I'm about to say will echo with what she already said. Today we have a lot of silos up here on the screen. We have different platforms, different genres. However, when it comes to, for example, digital minister, there could be hundreds of them. There could be dozens of them. When it comes to artistic expressions, there could be many. There could be the reggae, the rappers. There could be rock and roll. And so for me, I do not confine myself to any kind of genre or silo. This is what I mean by saying having an open response. The organizer told me that they would like to have me talk a little bit about having an open response to the pandemic so that we can engage the public. We can engage every citizen in the process of open recovery. However, it would be worthwhile for us to look at the industries that are on the rise as a result of the pandemic. The high technologies and large enterprises stock prices are actually rising during the pandemic. However, some industries are suffering. According to what T had just said, that amid the pandemic, there are technologies and infrastructures that have allowed us to continue to engage in art, engage in creation. Those would be industries that I have listed on the left-hand side of the slide. And on the right-hand side, we have other industries that have been adversely affected by the pandemic. The SMEs, catering, retail, meetings, incentives, conferencing, and exhibitions. So how do we connect the two sides? How do we break away from the confinements that have defined the silos of the different industries? How do we also inject new lives into the industries that are being affected by the pandemic? We need better narrative and storytelling abilities. So when it comes to stories, we're talking about culture or cultural content. So how do we, at the end of the day, look at the macro economics, the epidemiologies? How do we make sure that these ideas are accessible? they are comprehensible and understandable, and then they become useful information that could benefit all the citizens. If you look at each and every community, there are already members of the community that people trust. And 90% of people have internet connection here in Taiwan. So we are utilizing the expertise of these people within the community. They're our anchor points. They are our bridges. What are they? They are the pharmacists. They are the tech-savvy people. So by mobilizing these experts, we are able to create a mask map. We're able to create a real name mask rationing system that have helped Taiwan weather the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So originally, the government wanted people to use their national health card to pick up their masks. However, we're looking at other technologies. So we decided to work with the local pharmacists, and we decided to work with the staff of the convenience stores who are helping us establish these mask map and then helping us distribute these masks. So this really means that we need to go down and put our roots in the communities. So the civil societies are leading us. They're helping us, tiding us over the pandemic, because people know who the pharmacists are in their neighborhood. So if we ask, for example, the government to have a top-down policy to ask people to cooperate or comply with the government regulations, they will find the idea to be a little bit imposing or condescending. So the success of Taiwan's pandemic control measures is in fact built on trust, built on the direction we have chosen. We look at who people trust. Whoever people trust, we trust, and we use them as our anchor points as we communicate with the citizens, as we come up with the chatbots who will communicate pandemic information to the people, telling people about the benefits of wearing a mask. We are mobilizing the expertise of the civil society to create these masks. So we are able to get the message to the citizens, convince them, and tell them the reasons for the importance of wearing a mask. For example, we could use storytelling. What is the purpose of wearing a mask? It's for respecting others, to protecting your family members, to protecting the elderly members of the community, to protect yourself and the people that you love. So the storytelling has worked. So we have moved away from a top-down control kind of approach. We are using a better narrative to speak to the hearts of the people. We are using peer pressure. People are wearing masks. Other people around you are wearing masks. People would look at me, they're like, Audrey Tang, you're not wearing a mask. You need to take better care of yourself, and you need to think about how you can protect others. You don't want to be spreading your germs to the elderly members in the community. So we're able to get the ideas to spread, the ideas that are actually worth spreading, the ideas that people could relate to. So we have mobilized the communities, the pharmacists, the people who are able to find our storytelling to be extremely relatable. I think in this process, what we are essentially doing is to engage in capacity building. We're using different digital methods. These methods are not to replace the existing forms. We are enabling everybody to be digitally savvy, to have the ability to use these technologies so that they don't feel intimidated by the pandemic. They don't feel intimidated by the responsibilities as a citizen to protect one another. So here, let's look at some of the achievements. So we have been rolling out economic stimulants, the rationing system. We are able to see tremendous achievements. The revenue of retail and catering in September has reached the highest since 1999. And I think behind this success is a tailor-made storytelling process that had enabled us to create a bottom-up approach. We're not leading with economy. We're not leading either with with technology. However, the end result is culturally, economically, and exponentially gratifying. I know that the word exponential is really being overused. However, I have reached the end of my presentation. I would like to leave more time for Q&A, so I would like to end my brief comments here. Thank you.
今天我就是要上上下下，然后就非。
I would like to thank Audrey for sharing her thoughts with us. People are already submitting their questions to Slido. There are many questions already raised for the two speakers. Before we tell the speakers what the questions are, I would like to ask Audrey to come back on stage, and we will engage in a panel discussion first before we open the floor for questions. I need to remind myself I have to speak slowly. I know that there is, because of the transmission of the internet, there is a time lag. So we will all try to speak slowly. I have a question for T first. She talked about the need for artists instead of engineers to lead us into the future. In the past 20 years, we have seen cutting-edge technologies being developed. Back in the 90s, when we were using pagers instead of cell phones. But look at the way we live our lives today. Cell phones have become part of our anatomy. And this morning, I left the house without my cell phone, so I felt a little bit lost. So you said, T, that you have worked at the Creative Lab for 15 years. So looking at your time at Google, what are the most memorable examples of creative technologies that have really made a difference? Are we mastering the technology, or is it the other way around?
Very hard to say. I think that, as with all technology, like the technology that you're holding in your hands, whether that's a microphone or a pen, these are they are technologies. Yes. So we have always had technologies that have we absorb and adopt into our creative practice. I think amplification is a really interesting, like the idea of an amp and of amplifying sound. But within the last, in terms of technologies, I think that the most interesting thing that's happened at a broad scale has been the distribution and democratization of the tools, I suppose, of video making. So this notion that we can sit at home and have sort of a professional conversation is very radical. To go back 10 years and say, yes, we will have conferences in which we will be able to attend formally. I mean, we had, people would dial in, and this is it was not a crazy idea, but just the investment. So all of these things are basically reliant on other technologies. They're reliant on processor speeds, they're reliant on broadband, and they're reliant on platforms. So early on, the platforms were very keen to be open in order to become used. So there were many more APIs, like ways in which platforms could be used. And now that there's not so much. So that's the other side that I think is less happy. When I joined Google, YouTube didn't, I think, exist. And then 2 years later, we had bought it for $1 billion. Things can change very, very quickly. And but the things that don't change actually are the underlying hardware technologies. Their trajectory can be sort of seen and predicted. So if we look at the trajectory of smart tools, all of the operating systems for allowing people to take back a little control of their businesses, of their lives, of the experiences that previously we might have leaned in on the larger corporations for in their experience. So that's the thing that's most interesting at the moment, is a sort of defragment, I don't know how to describe it really, a decentralization, I think, as people try and take control back a little. Does that make sense?
谢谢 T。那我延伸那个 T 刚刚
T, thank you for sharing with us your thoughts. We use our cell phones every day. We consume content through our smart devices, but we're exposing ourselves as well. We think we are consuming information, but at the same time, people on the other end are consuming our information. Audrey also talked about how technologies are aiding the government to help us to facilitate our life. Technologies are being used for pandemic control and prevention. Through technology, we see people, but people see us. People see what we like. People get to know our preferences. So what are your thoughts on this? Thank you. T used a very interesting word. Decentralization or re-decentralization. People are adding 2 letters, re to decentralization, just like what T had already said. Maybe I should put it this way. When internet was created, there were big torrents, there were a lot of free styling. However, due to the development of the large platforms that are able to do a better job with legal compliance, it became more centralized. However, this is a deviation from the original spirit of internet. When you do the end-to-end principle, should be free. It should not be subject to other people's approval. So now people are coming up with practices and coding to make sure that there's no room for surveillance capitalism or authoritarian intelligence or intelligence collection. So you don't need to look far to know what I'm talking about. So what I'm saying is that from the government's perspective or from the capitalism perspective, these governances are running in contrary to the end-to-end principle that I just talked about. However, now we are seeing that more and more people are paying attention to this. For example, when I was asked to join the cabinet that year, we were talking to Line, L-I-N-E, this software developer, this corporation. Their encoding was only point-to-point encoding, so that then it became multiple point line encryption, so that the company cannot freely collect people's information. So originally, the company was just using the information that they collect from people using that software for their own benefits. We know that another platform, a software developer, beginning with the letter Z, is already collecting that information. But today we're not talking about technology, so I will leave this issue at that. So, next question.
As you all know, 2020, we've seen a black swan. And in science fictions and other parts of the content industry, when we think about the future and our imagination for 2050, we think about how will human beings live in the future. So can I ask both of you, can you tell us specifically, what was your imagination of 2050? What would the content for human beings and the lifestyle of human beings be in 2050? And 2020, has that disrupted that trend, or has it accelerated that trend of your imagination towards 2050? Can we have T respond first?
Of course, I think that is it's always a rich and wonderful thing to try and imagine. I do love when the fundamental things that we won't have foreseen coming. Like, people saw personal communication devices, but they didn't see the utter sort of the dominance of the way in which all other forms of identity, whether it's cash, whether it's money, whether it's income, right down to status, will be dictated by a small ugly piece of black plastic. And I think the thing that I'm not sure. I think there is always possibilities, especially with the work that's happening with quantum computing at the moment. I think it's like 30 years is going to be very, 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 very different. I'm very interested in, it's hard without getting too technical, but the vision that I really like, and the vision that I cling to, much as the way that Orwell wrote 1984 at the same time as A Brave New World, was you have these two visions, and I always used to think that one of them was rather nice, and actually we have very much more ended up in Brave New World. So I tend to steer towards the one that we will enjoy more, and I think that yes, 2020 will have absolutely done that, which is people have really had, I don't know how it has been in Taiwan, and Taiwan is a very different place, but certainly people have really reconnected around me and in my communities with nature. They have gone down the coast, they have gone upriver, they have gone out to the woods. They have lost themselves, and they have, I think there will be a fairly seismic waking up around the fact that the models that we had for work were very industrial, and we are in a post-industrial age. We do not need to go to the office from the start of the day's shift to the end of the day's shift. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't make environmental sense, so many ways. So there are many things that I think when we begin to see climate, when we can begin to marry some protections for the environment with self-interest, with these with the idea that people like it more, when it becomes something which then it becomes something which will be easier for people to sell. They are or to swallow. So yeah, I think that's the thing that I would love to see focus on, because I agree that also with technology, it's like what we try and do is get back to nature. What we really want is a computer that simply understands what we're saying. We want a conference where it shouldn't matter, because I'm on a nice big screen and everyone can see me and you can hear my words and you can hear them translated. But it does matter. So clearly it is not just the words. All of these are areas of knowledge that we don't actually know enough about, but that I expect us to over the coming decades. It'll be fun to watch anyway.
我发现 T 很像那个我很喜欢
T is actually like a Japanese architect that I really like. She likes weak architecture as well as weak technology. So the future that she portrays is one that is suited for me in old age. I don't know, Audrey, what do you think? And the architect that I was talking about is Kengo Kuma. So maybe I should talk about forcefulness. 2050 is 30 years from today, and Mount Jade in Taiwan may become higher by 70 centimeters because of seismic changes. And I think that is an interesting idea. We may call it Saviar or Mount Jade or whatever we call this mountain. The nomenclature may be short-term. However, the mountain becomes higher by 2.5 centimeters, and that is something that's constant. So what I'm saying is that in the past, when we thought about digital, it was a moment in someone's life. So we may look towards the next season, or when we think about disruptive innovation, we look at the next week or the next day, because things could be disrupted in our society. But I think what T was saying was a wonderful point. If we are not going for authoritarian intelligence, but assistive intelligence, for example, glasses or hearing aids, devices that help us communicate better rather than making humans become Superman. If we proceed down that trajectory, then we will have much more time to experience things like Mount Jade, a kind of spirit that has been around for a long time, part of nature. And if that can become a part of our democratic trajectory, that would be great. Before, if you weren't 18 or 20, you weren't considered a citizen legally. However, for posterity, it seems like they're not part of the democratic trajectory. However, with new technologies, we don't need to be confined to places like this meeting room or places with optical fiber. If we're on top of Mount Jade, we could still take nature and make that a part of what's presented to the eye, and people can think about nature in a non-linear form. What Audrey was saying about nature being around you, actually, I want to say that in our other exhibition venue at Mitsukoshi, we took this performance group, Youth Theater, and their surrounding landscapes, and we exhibited that at the Mitsukoshi department store as a part of the Creative Content Fest. We have a couple of minutes remaining, and there are some questions from the floor, so maybe we can take one or two questions from those of you on the floor before we proceed into Slido. We have many questions on Slido, and people are concerned about 5G. How significant is 5G to us? Maybe we can have T take the question first.
Oh, I don't know. There are things where it is a technology, or it is something which I have managed to appreciate is upsetting a lot of people, and I don't know. So sometimes there are huge black holes for me in the world, and that's fine. Like so actually that's one where I should probably now go and Google, but I can't even. Is it terrible that I don't know? I suppose it probably is.
I guess it's okay. 那还有个问题，
Another interesting question. Probably because I also think the same way. The internet, is it making us more unique, or is it making us more similar? The way that we consume information is becoming more and more consistent. So is it hard to identify unicorns? Maybe, Audrey, you can take this one. In regards to 5G, let me just say one thing. After starting to use 5G, it's been a couple of months for me. I don't need to be working inside my house. I can be on the road and enjoy 5G technology just like those in Korea. And I can communicate with my counterparts, and I know that they can respond in real time when they nod. And it's more natural for us to interact with each other. So I think we're taking that kind of indoor optical fiber experience outdoors. So that's what 5G has done to me. And I think that is correlated to your other question. As long as all of us, the way that we see the world, as long as that can be truthfully portrayed digitally, the contribution that we can make won't be just epistemological, but can be related to the ambience. if the surroundings around me, be it using 5G or other technologies, can be augmented, then we won't become the same individuals because diversity can be conveyed. Even though we're in the same conference room right now, you all see from different angles and perspectives. For example, I was trying to look at T in the eye. I actually was looking at the reflection of her on the interpreting booth because I see that the camera can present her in this light. So this is a kind of subjective experience that can be accurately reflected. And no one else can see the world from my perspective. So that's more plurality rather than singularity. And singularity deprives plurality. So as long as we can maintain plurality and see the world from diverse perspectives, we can take that into the digital world and not to worry about consistency. We have 2 more minutes remaining, so I'm wondering if there are any questions from the floor. Yes? I do have a question for Audrey. Taiwan has done extremely well in managing COVID-19. However, for Taiwan to be a part of the World Health Organization, it seems like there are many barriers ahead. So for a content creator or a technology developer, how can we contribute to that? Right. There is a site called taiwancanhelp.us. And this is a website that is wonderful at storytelling because it was established by a group of young YouTubers and also artists using crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. They were able to convey the idea of how Taiwan can help and to make that into a New York Times ad. And also our former Vice President Chen, he also recorded an online class about how Taiwan could help. And for those of you in Taiwan, you can also donate your extra masks to the website, to those that are in need. So what I'm saying is that this is a civil effort that takes collective power to make this happen rather than depending on the government. So this site or this team was able to leverage the strength of the crowd to make Taiwan stories known. And actually, in the beginning, their message wasn't crafted that well. And anyway, but afterwards, they made revisions and refinements, and they were able to depend on the donation of about 20,000 people. So originally, this ill-crafted message, using the wisdom of the crowd, became quite sophisticated and refined. So I think in the new age, the future is already here. But how do we spread the future? How do we empower more? That is a great example. We are running out of time. That was a wonderful panel, but we do have to stop. I'd like to thank once again Chi Uglo. We heard her talk about the form of books at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and we were so inspired by her words. And we think that she has opened up new imagination when it comes to living in the future. And I'd also like to thank Audrey for being so wonderful, for taking us to think about the future. And I'd like to thank all of the participants. Can we give our panelists another round of applause? Thank you. T, we're going to take a group photo with you, online and offline. So let's take a group photo. Thank you, President Hu, and also thank you, Audrey. Could you remain on stage? Let's set it up for the photo.
I'm not sure I've ever posed for a photo whilst online. Very strange.